Okay folks, so today we're going to start the respiratory system. It follows on from homeostasis. So this is one of the systems that helps us to do homeostasis. And just to remind you, homeostasis is the ability to maintain a constant internal environment. We are roughly, it's page 142 in the version of the notebook that I have, so you'll be a page or two ahead. As well as the diagram for the respiratory system, we're also going to just talk about the pathway that oxygen has to take to get into our lungs. There really is nothing new from junior cycle in this. Before we get into it, we are going to talk about the difference between respiration and breathing. So again, you did respiration in junior cycle. In senior cycle, we would define it as the breaking down of glucose to get energy in the form of this thing, ATP, for metabolism. So ATP is like the currency that our body uses as energy to do all our cell reactions. And we've already done metabolism, which is the sum of all the chemical reactions in the body. We did it when we did chapter 2. And the energy for ATP helps us to do all of those chemical reactions. In terms of breathing, at this point in your life, I'm hoping that you're really good at breathing. So the point of breathing, so if you inhale, what's going on? If you exhale, what's going on? So breathing is taking in oxygen, and we do that so that we can do respiration, but it also removes waste carbon dioxide and water. And it's this removal that helps us do homeostasis, helps us maintain that constant internal environment. Now at this point we would do some make and do, or I would have them already made from previous things. You can do this at home, and it makes a really, really good version of your respiratory system. So what you're doing is you're taking a plastic bottle, you need 2 balloons, you are tying one balloon off here and you are attaching it to the bottom of your cut bottle. It doesn't need to be very big, it just needs to be able to hold another balloon within it. You need to tape it really well, and you need to have your edges smooth, because otherwise they cut into your balloon down here and that ruins it. You need a straw and a second balloon, and you tie the second balloon onto the straw such that you don't crush the straw, and you put the balloon into your bottle. You then take plasticine or blue tack or whatever it is, and you form a seal at the mouth of the bottle, and now you have made something that very much resembles our respiratory system. So you should now have an idea of which parts of this make and do model are similar to the parts of our respiratory system. How were they similar, and then how were they different? And hopefully then thinking about this model will give you an idea for the pathway that oxygen has to take to get into our lungs. Now I'm going to show you this. I need to go out of this to do it, so bear with me. So this is quite an old video. It can be really difficult to get lungs because vets in abattoirs don't like to give them. So you can see here up at the top that this is a cut that was made in the abattoir, but we were able to kind of clip it together such that it would work. It doesn't inflate as well as it could do, and I'll show you a different video later on, but you can see that it gets bigger. So it's pink and shiny here, and now it's kind of getting more white as it's filling with air, but it's never going to get hugely full because this cut is going to leak all of the time. Okay, so from here we are going to go into our drawing of our respiratory system, so you can join me in this. So this is how we draw it. We have 2 ways in. We have a tube that goes off to the side, and we have a tube that continues down. We draw it like this. I might draw this a little bit chunkier, monkier. The tube splits off into 2, like so, and it gets ever so slightly smaller as it splits. And this tube will split even further again, and every time it does a split, the pathway actually gets smaller until at the end of each pathway we are drawing loads of little circles around it. So we are also going to put these little lines here on both sides, and we are going to give the outline of a pair of lungs here, and we're going to draw in the actual lungs here. Now, as well as this is a very sealed chamber, so you saw that from our bottle. We have a sheet of muscle here that fits in on your end, and then at either side we will have some muscles and a rib cage. Similarly over here. Now, as you know, my diagrams aren't great, but I try very hard. So all you need to think of as we draw it down is that the pathway is straight down, it subdivides again, and we do some labelings. So this is your nose or your nasal cavity. This is supposed to represent your mouth. This here is a piece of skin that covers over your trachea. It is called your epiglottis. And if you touch the front of your neck and swallow, you can feel that epiglottis move over. This is then your esophagus, your food pipe. So you want the food to go down there and not down your trachea. Here is called your larynx, so your voice box, and if you speak while touching it you will feel it vibrating, so it's a really thin membrane of skin. This is our trachea, and it has the rings of cartilage on it, and what the rings of cartilage do is they keep your trachea open so that air can get into your lungs. So when it divides the first time, it forms what's called a bronchus, and you need to be really careful in your diagram that if you are using the singular or the plural. So this is a bronchus, B-R-O-N-C-H-U-S, and the plural would be bronchi. So remember what you're labeling. So if it was bronchi, I would put in a second label here, but I'm not, because I'm using the singular. So I need to make this tiny so I can get rid of the red. Okay, so just please be aware of that, and even for the SEC, if they give you the diagram, have they given a singular or a plural, and you give them back the same thing. So when the path divides even smaller again, and I'm going to go with singular, it is called a bronchiole. So it's a smaller path, but it's a bigger word, B-R-O-N-C-H-I-O-L-E. And if you are going for the plural, it would be bronchioli is the plural. And at the end of your bronchioli, in the plural, is a thing called an alveolus, which is kind of, if you think of grapes, and the plural is alveoli. I feel like we're in Harry Potter. So at the bottom down here, this sheet of muscle is called your diaphragm. And here, these little white things are your ribs. And between your ribs are what is called your intercostal muscle. So if you like Chinese and you have ribs, then that is that. Now, just to put it in, up here, the back of your throat, it is called your pharynx. It's a mixture of your throat and just a posh way to say throat. So if you need to now finish your diagram, you pause here. Otherwise, we will go back to our diagram here. Now, so this is what you've just drawn. This is the very posh version of it. The only thing that is slightly different that we haven't put in, and I'll go back and put it in here, is you have a coating around the outside of your lungs. it is called your pleura, and the reason it's there is that if your lungs get aggravated, it is this membrane that gets aggravated rather than the lungs itself. So there's a thing called pleurisy, and that's inflammation of this pleura that people can get, usually later in life, if they're unhealthy in some way. So we've done everything. We haven't included the heart. You can put that in here if you wish, but we have included everything else. Now, so the last bit of today is just going to look at matching the component to its function. So your nose, we will talk about this in our next lesson, but the reason that it's recommended to breathe in through your nose is that the hairs in your nose and the mucus filter the air as it comes in. So the hair will grab microorganisms that are passing by, and they'll also get stuck in the mucus. And not only that, but it makes the air coming in moist and warm. And if you're an asthmatic who gets their asthma due to cold weather, then that's a really, really important thing. So we've said the pharynx, and that's the area that has the epiglottis and your larynx. We've talked about your trachea, so that is the windpipe, but it is the way into your lungs. Your thorax is just a posh word for your chest cavity. It includes your heart as well as your lungs, and it's the area between your ribs and your diaphragm. So if you're a thoracic surgeon, these are the guys that are going to crack your ribs open and look inside there. Your lungs, their job is gas exchange, so oxygen in, carbon dioxide out. And these alveoli, we'll look at them again in a later lesson. So if you can think of like grapes, really tightly packed grapes, they're little air sacs, and they have this huge surface area to allow gas exchange to occur. Your ribs are the protective function, and we've talked about ribs when we did our musculoskeletal system. So the names for all the different ribs: true ribs, false ribs, floating ribs. Our intercostal muscles, they are responsible for moving our rib cage up and down, and your diaphragm contracts and relaxes, which changes the pressure in our lungs and will help us either take oxygen in or remove carbon dioxide and water. Now, the last bit of our lesson today is the pathway of oxygen into our lungs. So this is just a video that was taken from a friend of mine, did bits of this for me. So you can see as going down a bronchus, the pathway divides, and the pathway is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller all of the time. So this is around the blood around the alveoli. So there's vessels, they're 1 cell thick, and this is where the gas exchange is going to occur. So again, it's going to replay for you, and as it goes through, you can see the walls are really, really moist, and they're very, very smooth, and it's just the pathway is getting smaller all of the time, because you want to be at that 1 cell thick level such that oxygen can go into your blood and carbon dioxide can go out. Now, so in terms of our pathway, so oxygen enters our nose. Where does it go next? It goes down through the trachea, into the bronchus, into the bronchioles, and finally to the alveoli. And from there, it's going to go into your bloodstream, and the manner with which it moves oxygen in and carbon dioxide and water vapor out is by diffusion. And we will talk a little bit more about gas exchange the next day. So for today's lesson, you are, in terms of your homework, it is quite short. You've done most of it already. You're going to upload the photos of your notes into the class notes section, and there is a link with the assignment that is essentially going to match a word. So you look at the diagram, there's loads of dots of the diagram instead of labels. There'll be a word come up, and you click the dot that matches, and you just send me a screenshot of your result where you're done. You can put it into your class notes. So as I say, there's a link for that. Okay, I am on Zoom for the duration of the lesson if you have a question. Otherwise, see you in the next lesson.